Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode in everyone's favorite Hangout TV show from NonPro, the NonPro TV Party Hangout special.
Hey.
Work on coming up with an official opening for the show that's less awkward than what we usually have.
I was digging the music, actually. I kind of was jamming out to an air guitar. It's been a while since I sat in on one of these.
An Air MIDI player. I'm host. I'm Frank. I'm joined not at all in studio by Ken and Matt. How are you guys doing on this fine Sunday night?
Doing well.
Doing well, dreading Monday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one more thing to dread about Monday is the hangover you're going to have having stayed up to 11 watching a brand new show that's coming out, Guillermo del Toro's vampire series, The Strain. It premieres tonight at 10 p.m. on FX. We have high hopes for it, and we are thinking, well, as long as the pilot doesn't absolutely stink, we're going to use this as our new TV party for the rest of the summer season. So I'm really excited about it. Del Toro, of course, is a big name for horror fans. And vampires are the new zombies.
You know, at first I thought this was actually a zombie show, so it actually took me by surprise when it was vampires, but it's some kind of weird circle is complete thing where it's both zombies and vampires or something like that. I don't know. Just like from what I've seen from the teaser trailers, it looks like it really sets itself up as a zombie kind of thing, but I was surprised to find out it was actually vampirism, which is they actually have a really interesting way of working that in this story.
Yeah, I feel like vampire was the original fad monster that nobody could have enough of, and zombies certainly overtook it in the last few years. And there is something, I think Matt's right, there's something about this series that vaguely feels zombie-esque, and that might be beyond the way the trailers have been shot and the horrible looking. It's been a while since we've had ugly vampires, at least prominent. Ken can probably speak more on this than anyone else. But also the fact that the vampires in this show seem to be. The reason why the show is called The Strain is that they're disease oriented. This is a plague. This is a virus or worm that causes vampirism, which isn't necessarily unique, but it is different than the sparkly magic vampire that we're all accustomed to. So, what do you guys think about vampires and zombies and horror fads in general?
Well, first off, I don't think it could be any worse than that made-for-DVD movie a couple years back, Zombies versus Vampires. So
I didn't
think I've heard of that, actually.
Was it awful?
Oh, God, was it?
Yeah. I can imagine that. But yeah, so I guess the first big fad for vampires was probably inspired by Universal horror vampires, I would assume, like Dracula himself, Bela Lugosi. I can't recall too many instances of ugly vampires.
Nosferatu?
Yeah, Nosferatu is the first classic example. There were some in Nightbreed that were kind of hideous.
Well, if you're going back, and Matt had brought up the idea of going full circle with Del Toro, Del Toro recreated the vampires in Blade 2, which essentially is kind of a look that we're getting now.
You're right. And Blade actually had more good-looking,
and it was a weird
vampires until the third.
And it was a weird strain of the vampire blood that caused the weird thing where the chin could open up and we'd have that monstrous tendrils coming out. And
yeah, Matt described it as alien face.
Yes.
There's the H.R. Geiger
term.
Yeah. You've got a face inside your face. And apparently the vampires in The Strain do have, as they go through the metamorphosis, that humans get infected with this vampire disease, and as they go through this metamorphosis, they have this little proboscis, this little thing that comes out underneath their tongue, that helps like drain their prey or inject their prey or what have you. I'm actually going in this relatively blind. All I knew about Del Toro's The Strain, one, like Ken said, is apparently he first started ruminating on this in Blade 3, but also there was a comic book that was out by Dark Horse, I think, a year or two ago, like in 2011 or so, which I didn't get a chance to read it, but it was the whole gimmick behind it is that we're reinventing vampires, which seems to be like the gimmick for most supernatural-based monster shows. This is a whole new kind of werewolf that you're about to see. Although if anybody has the chops to do it, I think it would be Del Toro. So I'm going to quickly go through a list of things. Like I said, I'm pretty blind. So let's go through this list of vampiric weaknesses, classic vampiric weaknesses, and you tell me whether or not you think the vampires from The Strain are susceptible to it. Ready, guys?
Ready.
Okay. So, and you could take turns or you could confer to one another as you wish. So, number one, the biggest weakness of all, one that maybe not have been a weakness so much in Dracula, sunlight. Do the vampires in The Strain suffer from sunlight?
It's a classic thing. I mean, why not, right?
I guess I think it'd be kind of difficult to work in, considering like there's a big thing that they're going for is like it spreads so fast and it's taken over the entire world, and I guess like this whole entire thing, okay, it can only start infecting people at night. Yeah. I feel like that's something they would omit.
Yeah, it seems like if the cure for the infection is just get like a few hours of sunlight, that would
go outside. Stop playing on the computer.
Yeah. Vampirism is just the steam sale. No, they're weak against sunlight because of the ultraviolet properties of sunlight. Something about this infection makes sense, right? Sort of. Cool. All right, another one that most vampire fans would argue with: silver. Is silver a problem for vampires?
Not originally. I think it was something that just became part of the culture when werewolves started dying down, when the whole fad started dying down, and they just transferred it over to vampires.
We have all these silver weapons, got to use them on somebody.
Yeah.
In this show, silver, and there is some argument that mythological silver, vampires, whatever, but silver in this show also harms our vampire cast because, once again, for their disinfecting properties. And there are some. Silver can be used as a disinfectant, apparently.
I would have called shenanigans if they said it was mithril.
All right. So, cutting off the head. And a part of the viral infection does mean you have a heightened healing reaction. And, like, you could bounce back from injuries faster. But decapitation, will that hurt our vampires in this show?
Considering it's called The Strain and it's a virus, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, I mean, like, it might kill a host, but I think the virus still lives.
You are technically correct. Decapitation will result in the vampire's death, but the vampire is still very contagious. The worms inside can infect others, I suppose. All right, so...
I was actually told if that happened to me, the same thing would happen.
Yeah, definitely. All your various infections are still very dangerous.
Yeah.
Will vampires be able to cross running water in this show?
I never got that. I think that was like a Hammer horror thing back in the 60s with Christopher Lee, where like for some reason he couldn't run across water. I would say no. Like it was in Christopher Lee's contract. He's like, I don't cross rivers. Yeah, absolutely.
Like
he didn't want to get wet, actually.
Wait a minute. So you mean like, can vampires like walk on water, or like for whatever reason they can't cross bodies of water?
Yeah, it was a weird thing in the lore that they couldn't. Yeah, they couldn't cross running bodies of water, lakes, rivers.
In mythology, it has something to do with purity, but in this show, does it have any bearing? Do you think it happens?
I can't see how they would fit that in.
I would say no.
Yeah.
Apparently, vampires cannot cross running water normally in this show. There is a way of overcoming this aversion, which will help in the attempt to make this into a plague, but apparently there is some reason, and the reason has something to do with vampire society. So this is kind of interesting. Vampires in the show will actually have some sort of ancient society as well. Garlic, any effect?
Bad breath?
Bad breath.
Exactly. There's no other effect than bad breath.
Yeah.
And crucifix or holy symbols.
Against a virus, I would say no.
I mean, from what I've seen in the trailers, there does seem to be some kind of mystical aspect to it. So, I know they're really going with pseudo-scientific explanations for the other weaknesses, but I'll take the long shot and say they're going to bring in some kind of religious weakness as well.
As of now, no effect on vampires.
Okay.
So crucifixes, isn't science-based enough to stop them, but running water is.
Yeah, I've noticed that one thing about vampires in almost all mythology. Religion seems to be the one thing that's laughable to consider as if it would stop a vampire. I mean, obviously, if it's a science-based vampire thing, you kind of understand it. But in this case, like, what? Oh, and the final one, and this is one I almost always forget about, silver-backed mirrors. Now, the legends are that vampires can't appear in a mirror.
Mm.
Again, I'm going to say because it's virus-based and not technically, I guess, following the full traditions of a vampire, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, that seems a bit out there.
Well, of course, if you were paying attention, silver-backed mirrors, vampires appear very blurry in, as if they were moving really fast, because possibly they are, because they're superpowered. But normal mirrors, like modern-day chrome-backed mirrors, they would appear as a normal person.
Interesting.
Okay.
So one thing's for certain about vampire mythos, it's always going to be full of crap. Originally, I heard that like Del Toro's big deal with this is to make vampires more realistic, but I think that's a mistake. I think what Del Toro wants to do, and what he does in most of the works he's done, is he wants to make them more awesome, more like unique and his own. So my favorite, it's not my first Del Toro movie, but my favorite is probably The Orphanage. Have you guys seen The Orphanage?
That was one of his newer ones, right?
It's relatively new. I mean, it's probably about 4 or 5 years old now, but it did get a limited release in the United States. And it's about an orphanage in Spain, I believe, during the Spanish Civil War. I'm almost positive of that. And no, I'm mixing up Labyrinth with The Orphanage. It's actually not in Spain during the Spanish Civil War. It's in the modern day world somewhere, maybe Spain. Maybe I'm 50% right. Anyways, it's about this woman who moves into an orphanage with her family, and it's effectively about her son going missing. And it's a ghost story. There's a bunch of ghosts in the story about like little kids from the orphanage who are haunting it, and it totally reimagined for me the idea of what a ghost story should be about. Like up until that point, ghost stories for me were a way of being scary, the same way vampire movies were or werewolf stories were. Like they're all about the spooks. But this movie made ghost stories a sad thing, a really sad but awesome thing. And I think, that's what Del Toro's the best at. So Pan's Labyrinth would be another great example. It's a whole new kind of fairy tale. Even if it's not completely new, it's just a new take on it, and he made it his own. So I think that's what Del Toro's really good at. So that's why I'm curious about how he's going to do vampires. Do you guys have a favorite or original Del Toro story you really want to talk about?
I would say probably the first Del Toro film I was aware of was back in the mid-'90s. It was the first one that I think came to the U.S. It was called Kronos. If you've ever seen or heard of it, amazing film. It's about this device that latches onto your heart, and as long as it's there, it'll allow you to live forever. There's consequences to it for doing it, but believe it or not, as weird of a story as it sounds, it's actually a little bit of a love story between a grandfather and his granddaughter, too.
That's really cool. I've also heard it has some sort of like vampire twist to it.
Well, I think it's just primarily the fact that the device keeps you alive forever
and the heart. Yeah, all right.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And I highly recommend it. It is one of the better films that he's ever put out.
How about you, Matt?
I'm ashamed to say I really haven't been too familiar with Del Toro until actually Pacific Rim. Even that, I've seen it after it's been in theaters and after it's been a while since on a on demand or DVD or whatever.
No Hellboy?
I've never seen Hellboy into completion, and I've only seen Blade 2. I've seen bits and pieces of Blade 2, but I've never seen either of those movies to completion. So bit of a shame on me.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least with Pacific Rim, I'm kind of going from the same angle as Frank, as Pacific Rim was basically Del Toro's take on anime, especially mecha anime, and in a sense, and how he kind of made that story into kind of his own. So that's what makes me interested about this show is what Frank was saying earlier, how Del Toro takes some common takes a familiar story and familiar settings, makes it his own. And so I definitely saw that with Pacific Rim, and that actually got me interested in the director and his style. So I'm curious to see where it goes with this.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example, even of more modern film, because you've got the mecha anime, and you've got the kaiju, the giant monster thing, which I mean he really recreated the entire concept in a very interesting and very cool way. It makes me kind of wish for. So I don't know if you guys have heard of this this alleged dream project Del Toro was working on, but he was on the very, very, very short list for In the Mountains of Madness.
H.P. Lovecraft?
Yes. Imagine a Del Toro directed H.P. Lovecraft story.
Amazing, actually. I mean, Stuart Gordon's probably one of the only guys that I can think of that has that cult standing who has fun with Lovecraft, but Del Toro would bring something completely different to it.
Yeah. I just didn't think they had the budget for it or the time, which is a shame.
Well, the other thing too about Del Toro, I don't know if you guys are aware of it. Back in the '90s, when he was doing, actually, I think it was on Kronos, and the same time that Peter Jackson was doing his stuff in New Zealand. The two of them actually, because of the limited budgets that a lot of the studios in their countries had, they designed their own production studios that still exist today, and they pretty much use it for everything they work on now.
Well, that's really
which is amazing.
Yeah. I wish our country didn't have a good film We have to move to some strange country that doesn't have a film company yet, or a film system yet. All right, so the TV show is going to be airing in about a few short minutes on FX, and it's got a pretty impressive setup. Of the people who were selected for this, so one of the main characters is David Bradley, who is a professor and owns a New York City pawn shop, and apparently has been investigating this phenomenon for a while. These were the people who were listed as being part of this series. Oh, I'm sorry, I blurted out who's playing it now. David Bradley is playing Professor Abraham Stretican, but these are the other people who were on the list. Roy Dotrice, who people probably know from Game of Thrones. Ken, where else was Roy Dotrice? We were talking about it beforehand.
One of the other things I loved him in was back in the '80s, the Beauty and the Beast TV series with Ron Perlman and Linda Hamilton.
That's right.
Yeah, he played the father to Vincent.
I remember him. Well, he was in Hercules for a brief amount of time. I think he was like the second actor to play Zeus. I think.
I think you're right. That's right.
God, what was his name? Anthony Quinn played Zeus originally.
That's right.
But I also I mostly know Roy Dotrice now from the books on tape of Game of Thrones. I think he's a character on Game of Thrones. I haven't seen the show. I've just listened to the books on tape, and I think he plays one of the maesters. But I don't really know. So Roy Dotrice was in the running for a while to play this professor, and John Hurt played the professor in the pilot. Which I can't imagine it's the pilot we're going to see tonight. I think it's in a version of the pilot that we won't see. Which is
He's got another connection to Del Toro with Hellboy.
Yes, absolutely. But David Bradley, most of our listeners or watchers probably know him from Harry Potter. He's the Witch, I think, is the name of the character, and he's in a couple of Doctor Who stuff.
He played William Hartnell in the TV movie,
which was perfect.
Adventure of Time and Space. Oh, perfect casting.
I'm really curious to see David Bradley in a more prominent, American role. He's in. It would be nice to see them. And there's a lot of other big names on this. Sean Astin is attached as a character, and we have a couple other Hellboy alum. I believe friend of the network.
Doug Bradley.
Doug Bradley is playing. Do we know his character? Well, I'm going to assume he's playing one of the more hard to portray vampires with the tiger mouth, the alien mouth. Which is cool. I mean, it's very good that they're putting this much effort into it. I have high hopes for this show.
I'm sorry, real quick, I don't have to cut you off. On the IMDb credit for this show, he's not even listed as a character. It just shows that he's in one episode.
All right. He may be our big monster reveal. We'll see. And then maybe we'll have him on a show to tell us what he was up to.
All right, working on it right now.
All right, as Ken sends out an email. There's a lot of good stuff. I'm looking forward to it, and to be blunt, I'm very excited that we might have a show that's the vanguard of knocking zombies off the pedestal that they are only barely on now. Zombie shows, I love them. They're good, but I've had enough. I want to see some villains with some real fangs. Oh.
You're actually starting to sound like Dan from the Loud Idiots now, Frank. That is very scary.
Vampire love. Also, frankly, I want to see more than I don't like zombie shows and zombie raid. I really don't like the monsters are just humans. I mean, the sexy vampire, the sparkly vampire, that's the thing we talk about a lot. But it's also the vampire that's only a vampire when we have the $5 of effects budget to prowl our faces. I'm not saying that those are always bad. I'm just saying that I'd like to see some more monsters that are monsters, and I think this show, if any, is going to deliver.
All right.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. We're going to tune in. We hope you guys watch the show with us. Come back next week at we're thinking about 9 o'clock to recap this pilot episode and wait for the next one. Hopefully, this will be a TV party to remember. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Ken you can listen to Ken on The Loud Idiots Tuesdays at 8 o'clock, and you can listen to Matt on The Line Cutters on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. You can listen to me in your dreams.
I always do.
Let's make this awkward, people. Thanks. Enjoy the show.